She walks into the elevator and never walks out alive. Hours later, a trunk appears near her home. Inside is a 12-year-old girl, Lola Daviet, Paris, October 14th, 2022. A date that should have been just another autumn school day. A whisper of fallen leaves along Rue Manin, the usual after-class chatter, backpacks bouncing, parents waiting, the rhythm of a Parisian neighborhood that knew its own routine. But somewhere in the quiet hum of that afternoon, a single shadow stepped out of the background, already drifting in and out of the building's lobby like an unanswered question. Lola had walked out of school as she always did, a quick wave, a light skip in her step, unaware that someone else, someone she didn't know, was already inside her apartment building, lingering around the lobby, hovering near the elevator like she belonged there. A familiar building, a familiar route, but an unfamiliar presence. And that was the day everything changed. Her father, working nearby, expected to greet her as he always did, checking messages, watching the clock, thinking of weekend plans. But when the minutes stretched longer than they should have and the hallway remained empty, a cold worry began to crawl over him. That first call to her mother wasn't panic, it was confusion. But confusion can bloom fast into fear. Soon he was scrolling through CCTV timelines, replaying footage frame by frame, his hands shaking just enough to betray the storm building inside Lola's last known steps were there, walking into the elevator with a woman whose face needed no introduction to investigators once the footage surfaced. A woman who looked like she had spent hours drifting around the building halls. A woman carrying a black suitcase, the one that would become the darkest symbol in the story. As her parents typed frantic alerts, as public witness notices spread across French broadcasts, as neighbors exchanged worried looks from their windows, a different trail was already forming, one captured by cameras across the city. By late afternoon, the suspect emerged in recordings taken at a nearby cafe, sitting beside that same suitcase. The suitcase she dragged across sidewalks. The suitcase witnesses couldn't ignore, even without knowing what was inside. Her mannerisms were off, her expression seemed mismatched with the world around her, her behavior unsettled enough that people later described her with terms like strange, lost, agitated, and the news headlines began forming almost in real time. Seen dragging suitcase, odd behavior captured on CCTV, person of interest spotted in multiple locations. Footage from inside the cafe showed her sipping a drink, scrolling through her phone, tapping her fingers, occasionally glancing at the trunk beside her. Not with fear, not with urgency, but with an eerie calm. Meanwhile, investigators retraced every step she took, mapping her movement from the building to the cafe and beyond, drawing lines that would soon converge back to a single grim location: the basement of Lola's own home. What happened behind that basement door remains sealed by police documents, but we do know this: there was no reenacted violence, no dramatized reconstruction. Only the cold facts. Objects recovered from the area painted a restrained but chilling picture. Tape on a table, a blade laid beside it, a staircase leading downward into a shadowy corner of the building where no resident expected to encounter something so unimaginable. Medical examiners later confirmed asphyxiation. A single word that hides an ocean of horror, but in honor of the family, the details stay clinical, respectful, factual. When investigators walked that hallway, their footsteps slowed, breaths held, lights searching for the truth that nobody wanted to find. And then, at the far end of the corridor, they saw it, a trunk. Innocent at first glance, unmarked, closed. One officer knelt beside it, his silhouette captured in still frames now etched into the case file. There was silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. And then the world changed. It didn't take long for the investigation to accelerate. Within hours, the suspect was located. Police vans rushed through Paris streets. Officers moved with the focus of people who already knew the magnitude of the case they were handling. The woman was taken into custody, her head lowered, captured only from behind in reenacted sequences out of respect for privacy laws. Court documents soon carried a red stamp: mise en examen. Under examination, under suspicion, under the weight of an entire nation's fury. Social media clips of her past surfaced, blurred for security, but enough to show a person with a troubled, unstable profile. Someone drifting between identities, between stories, between explanations that contradicted each other at every turn. And soon, the legal machinery began to move. The trial unfolded inside the Palais de Justice, one of France's most symbolic buildings, its stone halls echoing the footsteps of journalists, lawyers, families, all gathered for a story that felt too dark, too senseless, too heavy for any courtroom. Sketch artists captured the moments cameras couldn't show. Press microphones clustered outside like metal flowers pointed toward the truth. Over and over, the cafe footage replayed in court, slower this time, longer without sound, the silent suitcase holding the loudest meaning in the room. Psychologists, investigators, forensic experts presented their conclusions. The defense struggled to build a coherent frame around someone whose actions seemed detached from rational motive. And as the days passed, France watched the proceedings with a mixture of grief, outrage, and disbelief. When the verdict finally came, the courtroom became silent enough to hear the hum of camera batteries. The judge delivered the sentence with a weight that resonated through every corner of the chamber: life imprisonment without parole. Perpétuité réelle. Real-life sentence. A historic decision, rare in the French justice system, reserved for the gravest of crimes. Headlines exploded across newspapers. A historic sentence. Perpétuité réelle pronounced. Justice for Lola. And as the suspect's blurred image appeared across channels, darkened, zoomed in, rendered symbolic more than personal, the nation let out a collective exhale, though nothing could be called closure. For Lola's father, the story didn't end with the verdict. His life had become a loop of surveillance screens, recordings, and timestamps, the very tools that helped unravel the truth, but also served as constant reminders of the moment everything shattered. A keyring placed gently on a table, a framed photo of his daughter in soft focus, a candlelight vigil outside the school where children left messages, drawings, flowers. Parents held their kids closer. Strangers gathered with candles. Silence held more power than words. And as his voice cracked in interviews, one line stayed with everyone who heard it. "My life ended the day my daughter's did." The case ignited debates across France. Questions about immigration, social services, mental health evaluations, system oversights, and political responses. The National Assembly erupted in arguments. Newspaper front pages filled with opinions, analyses, criticisms. Even the president met with the family, offering condolences that could never feel enough, caught in the delicate balance between grief, state responsibility, and public pressure. The country wasn't just mourning. It was searching for answers, for reforms, for understanding of how someone could slip through administrative cracks with consequences so devastating. But beyond the politics, beyond the debates, beyond the courtroom, there was still the memory of who Lola was. A child full of light. A girl who loved gymnastics, who walked school corridors with ribbons in her hair, who played in parks and laughed with friends. A life that should have stretched decades into the future, but instead became a symbol in the present. A reminder of innocence broken by a moment of unthinkable cruelty. The playgrounds she once crossed now stood empty, the corridors she once filled now echoing with absence. And so we return to the elevator doors, the same doors from the beginning, slowly closing. Closing on the innocence of that day. Closing on the last time she was seen alive. The cafe trunk freezes in a final still frame, a haunting image not for shock value but for truth. Then the world fades into soft sunlight, white flowers glowing against a quiet background, a tribute that speaks without needing to raise its voice, dedicated to Lola and to every family forced to live with the unthinkable. If this story moved you, if it made you stop for a moment and think about the world we're living in, then don't let it end here. Share this video so more people understand the truth behind these cases. Subscribe if you want more deep, carefully researched documentaries that bring light to the stories most channels won't touch. And drop a comment below. Not for the algorithm, but to keep Lola's memory alive, to keep conversations going, to remind the world that these cases are not just headlines, they're human lives. Every like, every share, every comment helps this channel continue making respectful, long-form investigations without sensationalism. If you want to support this kind of storytelling, quite honest and real, then join the community by hitting subscribe and turning on notifications. Thank you for watching and for remembering.